Good evening. Good evening and welcome. Good evening and welcome to the Monday, September 27, 2021 meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education. In accordance with the State Sunshine Law of New Jersey, adequate notice of this meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education was provided on September 23, 2021 to the Hillsborough Beacon and the Courier News. Mr. Mahmood, may we have a roll call, please?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mr. Kidd? Here. Mr. Marini?
Present.
Mrs. Maroon?
Here.
Mrs. Nurse?
Here.
Mr. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mrs. Stats?
Here.
And Ms. Trujillo?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. May we now please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to acknowledge the correspondence is listed on 4.1. And then I would like to move ahead to the committee reports this evening first, and then we will open it up for public comment before the board votes on the action agenda. So Ms. Maroon, if we could have the Education Committee report first.
Certainly. Okay, the Education Committee met on Wednesday, September 15th. We had a robust meeting and discussed science textbooks, the strong evaluation expansion, the November election day, median class sizes in grades K through 8. And while every committee discussed the policy regarding the homeschooled students' participation in athletics and co-curricular activities, it is the Education Committee that will report everything out. I must note that a thorough and complete chronology and picture was provided to all committees as thoughtful, meaningful, and deliberative discussions of former boards have taken place in regard to this specific topic. While this board also appreciates the choices and decisions of other school districts at this time, it was decided that we will keep the existing policy intact in regards to homeschooled students and athletics clubs and and extracurricular activities. Each committee agreed that in addition to a variety of other reasons and variables, the means of monitoring these students' individualized academic programs is inconsistent and may not fall within the Hillsborough District's athletic and co-curricular policies in regards to eligibility. Factors such as attendance, lates to class and school, and disciplinary records, also referenced in numbers 3 and 4 of policy 2431, are not able to be observed and can create equity issues for all students involved in these said activities. We know that this decision may not make our homeschooled community happy. However, it is our decision at this time, and it was thoroughly and thoughtfully discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maroon. Ms. Stats with the Communications Committee minutes.
The Communications Committee met on September 15th. We discussed a possible, an update on climate survey vendors. There are 2 vendors that we are exploring, and also how we're going to look into what the content of the survey would be, whether it will be about how the community is willing to spend tax dollars versus the feelings of the community. We also looked at the results of the March 2021 climate survey, which was conducted collaboratively with administration and the HEA. Dr. Antunes also shared that with regards to the Rutgers Labor Management Collaborative, we're waiting to get communication from them. We discussed the possibility of exploring collaboration on our own or to initiate contact with Rutgers. And as Ms. Maroon already said, we also discussed athletic competition among homeschooled students, and she gave an excellent summary of that. And we discussed the possibility of having a meeting of the whole board, so some topics can be discussed together instead of through committee meetings. And it was emphasized that that would have to be advertised and made public if we did do that. And on another note, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention a presentation called Minding Your Mind. I believe an email was sent out to the Hillsborough Township community. It's going to be a webinar featuring experts in the field and a young adult speaker who will share their story of hope, resilience, and recovery. And it's an introductory mental health education program that will educate participants to look beyond stigma and notice warning signs of stress, anxiety, depression, and crisis. It will take place this Wednesday from 6:30 to 8, and it is a Zoom meeting. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Mr. Oliver with the HR report.
I didn't think the meeting was that long, but looking through these minutes, we covered a lot of topics. So we talked about the staffing shortages, obviously, which are plaguing all the schools. We talked about the vaccinations and where we're currently at with the staff, and how we need to handle the unvaccinated staff with testing. At the time of that, we currently had 86% of the staff had been vaccinated, which is phenomenal. We think it's even going to be better once everyone is able to upload their cards. We're painfully aware of the problems we're having with the buses and the bus routes. Again, another problem that's just happening statewide, the shortage of bus drivers, the ability to get the licenses to become bus drivers, the backlog at DMV to get the licenses. So we are working through it as best we can. But again, another crisis that is just plaguing school districts across the country. We are going to be working with the township administration and the police to try to help the drop-offs and making that a little smoother transition. But again, I know patients are wearing thin, but please be patient because we are doing our best. It's really tough. Sunnymead enrollment's grown considerably, which is a good thing. Working through getting those classes, we're going to be relying on some districts moving or some overflow over to Triangle, which is being worked out. We talked about leave of absences. We talked about swim coach. We did discuss the athletic policy with homeschool students. We're not taking that decision lightly, but we had very robust discussion. There are very few districts in our area that allow homeschool students to play athletics. I think that it is a privilege and you need to earn that right. You need to earn that right through academics. And we just don't have that leverage over that student to keep that academic level up. So the decision was not made lightly, but we're confident that it is the right decision at this point. And just a note, Mr. Gillette did not keep us waiting this meeting, so I thank you, Mr. Gillette.
Did I do? Oh, yeah, right, you have your meeting right before us, right after us, correct. Is it my turn?
Sure, Mr. Gillette, would you give the
Okay,
operations?
operations met on September 14th. We discussed the advisability of having school in session on election day to make up for the day we missed at the beginning of the year due to the storm, whether that would be advisable or not. That decision has not been made. Mr. DeLuca provided a referendum update. All the projects for the referendum are progressing nicely. HVAC is coming on just about something new every week, so that's very good. He also provided us an update on the damage from the storm. As you already know, the middle school had the most damage, 9 classrooms, 6 guidance offices, also the boiler on hot water heater were damaged, may need to be replaced. We're working with our insurance company on that. 3 of the schools had damage to the gymnasium floors. That was Sunnymead, the high school, and Aris. We talked about, Mr. Mahmood reported that we restructured some of our bus routes, including renting 4 buses from the Educational Services Commission, hiring 4 drivers to try to somehow fill the void left by some of our contractors not fulfilling their contracts, advising us they couldn't fulfill the contracts because they're lacking drivers. And that's an ongoing problem, which they're working on a daily basis. We also discussed the athletic competition for homeschoolers issue, as was reported. We'll review responses given by Ms. Major from Sodexo to questions about the lunch menu. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. And the Governance Committee met on September 15th, and I will give a report on that. We covered a few bylaws. One of the bylaws is on the agenda tonight, Bylaw 131, with relatively minor changes. The change is basically, there was an optional statement to read, bylaws, policies, or regulations may be abolished at any meeting of the board, provided the proposed abolishing of the proposed bylaw, policy, or regulation has been approved by the board at a previous meeting of the board. So therefore, it would now take 2 board meetings in order to abolish a current bylaw or policy or regulation. Then again, the Governance Committee also discussed the athletic policy. And as Ms. Maroon reported out, we also touched briefly upon a possibility of a March 2022 tax levy referendum. No decisions have been made on that, just informational. And also again on Election Day. And then there was also discussion on several bylaws regarding the conduct of board meetings, public participation in board meetings, and board member election and appointment. And the attorney is reviewing these revisions prior to being on the agenda for first and second readings. So that completes the committee reports, and I would like to open it up to the board for any questions on committee reports or anything on the action agenda before we open it up to the public. Okay, seeing none from the board, then I will now open it up to the public for comments on the action agenda only. So I will read the preface. We very much welcome input from the public. During board meetings, there will be 2 30-minute periods of time that the meeting will be open for public comments, where members of the public are invited to comment. During the first public comment period, members of the public may comment about items that are listed on tonight's agenda before the board votes. During the second public comment period, members of the public may comment on any school or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the school district as per bylaw 167. Before you state your comment, you will be asked to provide your name and address. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent will address the comment. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. Kindly note that the Open Public Meetings Act and the privacy rights of public employees encompassed therein do not permit the board to discuss personnel issues in public session. So if there are any comments from the public on the action agenda only, please come to the podium.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Barker. I'm the mom that you're talking about in reference to allowing my
Ms.
homeschooler.
Barker?
Yes.
So that was on committee reports. It's not on the action agenda, so I'd please ask.
Oh, I have to wait? I can
Please
wait.
for the second. Thank
I'm
you
sorry,
very
I
much.
thought, because since you
No
talked about
worries.
it.
No worries, thank you. Are there any other comments from the public on the action agenda? Seeing none, then I will close the first public comment period and turn it over to the superintendent.
Minutes first.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, thank you. So now we will approve minutes. We have to approve the executive session minutes from September 13th, 2021. May I have a first and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Marini.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. Then may I have a motion and a second for the September 13th, 2021 regular minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Marini.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Motion passes.
Thank you.
You abstain? No problem. We'll take that. We'll take that.
Thank you, Ms. Maroon.
That works.
And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Antunes for the action agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Trio. We will move it, as we've done the last several meetings, as a full agenda. I will read through each one, though. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the education agenda as follows: 10.1 to 10.7, to motion to approve travel-related expenses, revised curriculum, to accept the IDEA grant funds, to discard science textbooks, to approve the concurrent enrollment courses and stipends for the 21-22 school year, to approve stipends for the after-school language extended exploration program between October 2021 and March 2022, and approve the 2021-2022 out-of-district placements as we know them to date. I also recommend that the Board of Education approve the HR agenda as follows: motion to approve the resolution as listed, to approve a sidebar agreement as listed, motion to approve retirements and resignations, and I'd like to point out that we have a secretary who's worked with us for 21 years, Mrs. Gail Guido, and she's retiring as of January 1, and she will be missed, and we thank her for her service to the students and staff of the district. Motion to approve contract changes as listed, as well as transfer and changes in assignment. Motion to approve leaves of absence and reappointments. Motion to approve appointments, and motion to approve mentors and buddies. Motion to approve PSAT proctors, as well as 6th and 7th period coverages. Motion to pre-approve extra coverage and approve extra coverage. Motion to approve summer work hours, and motion to approve unaffiliated administrator salaries 21-22. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the ops agenda as follows: motion to approve the monthly financial statement, the monthly bills, motion to approve the bylaw for first reading, as well as the donation as listed.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. I know that Ms. Nurse,
Yes, I'm requesting that we separate out 11.15, please, for vote.
so is there anybody, I understand that 11.15 would like to be separated out. Mr. Mahmood, in the past, would you recommend that we could move it we could first and second as a whole, and then the individuals who would like to abstain or vote no could just say yes to the whole accepting 11.15?
Yes, the President, we can do it that way as well. I think that's probably what we've been doing in the past, so I'd like to do it that way.
Would that be okay with you, Ms. Nurse?
Can you repeat what?
Okay. So we'll take a first and second on the entire agenda, and then when it comes to voting, you can say yes to the entire consent agenda with the exception of 11.15, and then you can state how you'd like to vote on that. Would that be okay? Or we can separate, that's
fine.
okay. Thank you, Ms. Nurse. May I have a first and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Marini.
Second.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Can we separate 10.4 out with the textbooks? I'd like to at least discuss that before we vote on it.
Yeah, we could talk about it now.
Sure, we can absolutely talk,
Ask
we can
your
absolutely talk
question now.
about it.
Talk about it now? Okay.
Hang on,
So-
wait, one question. Mr. Marini, thank you for the first, and Mr. Pulsifer, was that a second?
Yes.
Okay. So now we're open for discussion on 10.4.
So we've had robust discussion in the past about discarding of textbooks, and I know both from the public and then from the dais here, it just seems to be silly that we, throw out textbooks if there's someone out there, but we explored many, many options and just couldn't find anybody that wants them. We now have somebody that wants them. The Rotary Club of Hillsborough would like to accept any donations of books we have. They have an avenue to submit those to Rotary International, whether they're sending them to third world countries. I understand that these are outdated. They're maybe not teaching current curriculum. They obviously understand that, but they would gladly accept any of these donations. So I don't know how we start that process and how we change this to donating these books to Rotary Club. So that's what my question is or discussion is.
Mr. Mahmood,
Sure.
would you?
I think, Mr. Oliver, it's a good question. We have talked about sort of what we can do with discarded textbooks. And from what we've gathered, as far as what we do with the Department of Ed, we certainly file that these are going to be discarded, but there is no mechanism that allows us to give it to any particular one group, because then it could be another group saying, hey, we want them, puts the board in a spot where they'd have to make decisions on who they're giving something that the board owns, which technically gets discarded. However, I think that your question rises to the point of, we could ask the question, we can reach out to DOE, directly, I can reach out to them and say, hey, look, we had this question brought up specifically for the Rotary Club that's interested in any books that we have, regardless of age. And I'll ask the question. I don't think that any harm would be done in asking the questions at the DOE directly, and I can report that out at the next meeting or the ops meeting.
And I apologize because we've belabored this subject quite a bit, and I know it's a burden on the administration to do this. But if there's an avenue to send them to, third world countries or someone who could actually use them, I think it quells a lot of, criticism we've had from both the public and from the dais. So could we table this motion?
I'm okay with it until the next meeting.
Or we can approve it and then come back. We won't discard them yet. We can come back to them.
We can do that.
Because if the answer is no, then we can eliminate them.
We can do that.
If
We can-
that's okay.
Mr. Oliver's good with that.
I mean, it seems odd that if we're going to throw them out, we can't just give them to somebody here.
Not
I
our
mean, it
rules,
just-
though.
I think I
It
would
just seems
prefer to
silly.
table that as opposed to vote for it and then do something different with it.
Mr. Pulsifer?
I was just going to add, I mean, to your point, Mr. Mahmood, about multiple people or multiple groups being interested, can we set up a process where we post or announce at a board meeting that a certain set of books are available, and you have X amount of time to say you're interested, and if not, or if the only one who steps up and says they're interested is Rotary Club, because I'm with you, we don't want to give it to one group and have somebody show up the next day and say, oh, but I want some. But I think if we make a process around giving people a month or something to say, I'm also interested, that might satisfy the concern about not distributing them to everybody who wants. And quite frankly, I think most of the time, as much as we talk about, we really ought to do something good with them, we usually can't find an organization that actually is interested. So if we can find an avenue to make a process, I think that would help.
I would be remiss, though. It is a true burden. We do not have the capacity to do this with all of our textbooks. We just don't. We don't have the time. We don't have the administrators. We just don't have the capacity
But
to do it.
I guess what my point is if we said, for example, if we put it on the agenda for a motion and it has to go on an agenda, so we put a motion out there, right? So we're going to discard textbooks, and that kind of puts everybody on notice. If you want them, come claim them, come pick them up. And then the second meeting it comes to, nobody came and claimed to pick them up, or, oh, Rotary Club came to pick them up, and they're gone. So again, I'm not trying to give the administration more work, but I'm just trying to quell some concerns out there in the community that we're throwing these books out, that there's no one that wants them. Well, there's somebody who wants them.
So Mr. Oliver, this issue has come up many, many times. I myself has been one of them who have objected to discarding textbooks because it just seems like horrible. However, in this particular case, I did ask the question in Education Committee with Dr. Feltry, and like as you had mentioned, that the science in here is outdated. To your point that perhaps it would be sent to another country, I don't know if that would make things better. Like if the textbooks are teaching outdated information. So, Dr. Antunes, would the committee Ms. Maroon, would Education Committee be the committee to discuss this more fully in? Then may I make a suggestion as to take Mr.
Or I
Maroon?
guess the question is it just a request of the state? Can we do this? If nobody wants them, we've put out feelers in the community. Anybody wants them, come get them. Somebody came and said they want them. We're going to discard them. Can they come? Maybe that's a simple solution.
Well, I think, Mr. Oliver, that part of it, for example, as Dr. Antunes said, with respect to staffing levels and the burden on our administrators that is actually outside of the scope of what their standard duties would be, that this would be above and beyond. And from my personal experience, not on textbooks, but everything that I have a lot of great ideas, but it always takes longer to execute the great idea because there are always steps in the way, right? And so I absolutely empathize and agree. When we talked about this before, with textbooks, it's terrible to have to throw textbooks away. Any kind of book, it's just terrible. It just feels bad. But the logistics of actually implementing it, so I would I would say that it is, even if it is possible, like, and I would be interested to hear from the Department of Education to hear if it's possible to. However, even if it were possible, I think that that puts an undue burden on the administration, and perhaps not our highest priority right now as administrators and staff, because who would basically be the ones doing it, are right now, in the process of opening, making sure, everything is going smoothly with schools, which they have. So, very grateful for that. So
I'll take the burden off and I'll spearhead it. I'll be the volunteer for it. It's a phone call to the Rotary Club and say, they're at Woods Road, come pick them up. And you got to pick them up by Friday. They'll probably pick them up the same day, but if take the burden off, I'll spearhead it.
okay, Ms. Stats?
Yeah, when I first brought this up a few years ago, well, not a few, maybe a couple years ago, that I think some of us volunteer, some of us board members volunteer to do it, but it was still a concern of logistics. But maybe if we can explore this further in the education committee and get into why or why not the logistics are a problem.
I mean, and trust me, I'm not volunteering for a book fair, right? So I don't want to sit at Woods Road School and have 100 kids come in and take 100 textbooks. I don't feel like, but I'm talking about a phone call to Rotary Club and say, come pick them up, and they're gone. So to me, it's almost easier than throwing them out, but I don't know. But again, if you do it once and you find out the answer to it, then it's done.
Mr. Pulsifer?
As an extension of this discussion, I think, excuse me, since it's probably about time to start our budget preparations, we have repeatedly over the last, at least 6 months and probably a year or longer, had discussions at this table where the answer was, we don't have administration. When you look at the numbers, I believe we're, like top 5 in terms of lowest. This is not a good stat. It depends on how you look at it. Economically, it's a good statistic. In terms of running the district, it's a bad statistic. We have one of the absolute lowest administrator per pupil ratios. And that shows when we have our discussions at the board table about doing some of these things that are not priority 1, but they're still important, valuable things to do. I think we need to think about some level of increase in administration, because we're not serving our public because we don't have enough administration. And I understand that there's a cost to that, and I understand that there are other places where we might need personnel, teachers, and other positions, but it's a problem that we, on just about a weekly or every meeting basis, we have a discussion about something we think we should do. And the legitimate answer is we don't have administrative staff to do it. I'm not faulting the administration, but that tells me we need to do something about having enough administration to take care of the things that need to be done. And if we don't have it right now, that should be something on the list of important things to do as we start working on the next budget.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. So, Mr. Oliver, for moving this forward, and Mr. Mahmood, would you recommend that we table 10.4 and refer to Education Committee as well as?
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of the motion, do
So
we
we
make
could-
now a motion to?
No, I would, it's a postponement, so we don't have to take an official. We just, the superintendent won't present it. So we'll consider that postponed, and it will come back on the next agenda. So, action would be taken. The board is not voting on that item tonight. It's postponed, and it would be brought up at the next board meeting, and no formal additional action has to be taken.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. All right, so now we have a first and a second, and Mr. Gillette.
Can we talk about 11.15?
11.15?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Gillette.
so I have the feeling that if job responsibilities have changed significantly, maybe that requires a new job description and a whole new job title and a whole new base salary. I don't like the idea that give salary increases under the theory that, responsibilities have changed. Well, have they changed so much that some of these are brand new jobs? I guess it's a question for Dr. Antunes. Has anyone's job responsibility on 11.15 changed so much that it's a new job, almost? Because maybe it should be a new job and not an increase way above the norm. I'm just saying above the norm. And I guess we can't say, I'm not allowed to say too much about it, but I'm saying that. And write me up, I don't care. What are you going to do? But that's my thought on it. So I guess you can tell I'm voting no on it.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Ms. Nurse?
I think just with so much discussion, if we can go back, can we separate out 11.15 in the vote? Not just individually, but as a whole, separate it out.
Sure. So, Mr. Mahmood, if we,
So we move the whole agenda without 11.15,
Okay.
and then we take a vote on 11.15.
okay, yes. And then also, right, okay. Any other discussion on the action agenda? Okay. Okay, seeing none, may we have a roll call on the entire action agenda minus 10.4 and minus 11.15?
Which is the 10.4 is postponement.
Postponed, yes.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver? Yes. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
And Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
May we now have a motion in the second for 11.15?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Marini. Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Kidd?
Well, my concern is since.
Mr. Kidd, if you would,
My concern is since this is half a personnel issue, if we should move this to executive session, if we actually want to have a detailed discussion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kidd.
My issue is for this in particular, I feel like in order to actually have a productive conversation on it, we would need to be in executive session. So if we want to have productive conversation, should we move to executive session or postpone the next meeting?
Mr. Kidd, there was an executive session on it in August, the August board meeting, which I believe you were not in attendance? Yeah,
Oh, no, that was the one meeting I wasn't here for, actually.
and so I think we need to take a vote on it tonight on 11.15. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, Mr. Mahmood, we could have a roll call, please.
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
No.
Mr. Kidd?
Abstain.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Abstain.
Mr. Oliver? Yes. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Abstain.
And Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. And now I'd like to turn it over to the superintendent for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Trujillo. Let me go back up here. Okay. Okay, so tonight's board meeting, while I'm welcoming everybody, as many of you already know, we are live streaming this meeting. We did it last time. We did announce it in the notice that we were going to continue live streaming, so we are doing that. Please visit the district website if you haven't done so. That will direct you to the live stream should you wish to do so. I, as well as some of my colleagues and board members, had the pleasure of attending the High School Marching Band Festival on Saturday, September 18th. It was a beautiful night with incredible performances, and a big shout out to the Hillsborough Band Parents Association and the high school staff and our B&G crew who always go above and beyond in making these festivals outstanding. I'm also thrilled to share that it was recently announced that the class of 2022 has 21 national merit semifinalists. Of the 1.5 million entrants, approximately 50,000 students in the country with the highest selection index scores qualified to be high scorers, and 16,000 became semifinalists. The semifinalists may now apply to be national merit finalists. Approximately 15,000 of the 16,000 semifinalists will be named finalists and can then apply for national merit scholarships. In March 2022, 7,500 of the finalists will be announced and will be awarded $2,500 per year, a corporate-sponsored scholarship and a college-sponsored scholarship. Congratulations to all of these students as you move forward in the scholarship process. We will welcome them to a meeting and have a formal congratulations. You will note on tonight's agenda a list of policies and regulations that require annual review. They've already been approved. There's nothing that the board needs to approve. It's just that we put it out there as an annual review requirement. These policies and regulations are also listed in the district calendar and handbook that is distributed to families annually. Please take a moment to review these policies and regulations. Also, while on the website, take a look at our refreshed Board of Education section of the website that includes pictures and bios of board members, as well as a helpful chain of communication that may help parents navigate a variety of areas, including curriculum instruction, special education, discipline, and transportation, to name a few. Finally, it's been brought to my attention, I'd like to be sure our parents are aware, that there's a social media trend encouraging students to participate in activities that may include vandalism and various acts of harassment. Some of these monthly activities include damaging school restrooms, destroying school signs, as well as inappropriate behavior towards staff members and students. We expect more from our students in Hillsborough, and all of these behaviors are unacceptable. Should any of these activities take place on school grounds or with the use of district Chromebooks, students will be held accountable based upon the district's code of conduct. These trends are now being encouraged in students in grades 5 through 12. Please have conversations with your children on these activities, as our staff has done, our building administrators. And if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to your child's school counselor and or the building administrator. Thank you, Ms. Tria.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. I would like to take a moment before I open it up for board comments on any topics of interest about last meeting's public comment and also some emails that we've received regarding critical race theory. And I think it's a confusing topic because of the definition, and it depends on how people define it. So the way I'm defining it is the way New Jersey School Boards defines it, is that critical race theory is a framework and or analytical tool primarily used in higher level university and graduate courses. And it was developed to help law students think about the impact of policy. And this was developed post the Civil Rights Movement and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So critical race theory is not required by the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, nor is it taught in public schools. The reference class that I think some speakers at the podium have talked about, which is Race in the United States, is an elective course at the high school, and it's not currently running this semester. I also wanted to remind our viewers, both in the room and at home, that Hillsborough Township Public Schools is a safe, welcoming, and inclusive environment for all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual or gender identities, mental and physical disabilities, socioeconomic status, and religious beliefs. School Boards has put out frequently asked questions about educational equity and critical race theory that is available on their website, njsba.org. And you can search for the term critical race theory, and it should pop up for you so that you can read more about it. And the other thing I wanted to say before we open it up for board comment is a reminder to use the district's communication chain that I myself sometimes forget. Thank you, Ms. Stats. And that you can navigate to the district's communication page from the main page and then go to Board of Education. It's the last drop down that says District Communication Chain. And basically what it is a handy reference chart about various different topics that you might have questions about and which resource you should go to first. So for example, we had gotten some information or some queries about certain topics that happen in the classroom, for example, mask wearing. It's best to ask your child's teacher first and then to go through up the chain of communication in the building. And with that, I will open it up for board comment before we open it up for a second public comment. Okay, then I will now open it up for second public comment on any topic. Oh, should I read it again? Okay, not usually, but okay. So for this second public comment, so it is, I have it here. During the second public comment period, members of the public may comment on any school or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the school district as per bylaw 167. Before you state your question or comment, you will be asked to provide your name and address. Please understand that public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent will address the comments. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. Kindly note that the Open Public Meetings Act and the privacy rights of public employees encompassed therein do not permit the board to discuss personnel issues in public session. And with that, I will now open it up for public comment.
Phil Gantz, 94 Marshall Road. At the last board meeting, as you just indicated, there was much discussion about critical race theory and how it has seeped into the curriculum here in Hillsborough. I'd like to note this evening, about an hour before tonight's meeting, I did receive an email back to the email that I sent 12 days ago about the topic that really didn't address all my concerns, which, as unfortunately as a parent and taxpayer in this town, I find very disappointing, but frankly not surprising. When I moved to this town a little over 10 years ago, before I had children, one of the reasons was the high-quality public school system that I hoped my future children would attend. As I look at the districts now and how some of the leaders of this district have conducted themselves, I feel it may have been a poor decision. At the last board meeting, Ms. Stats in particular had offered her support of critical race theory, talking about how it provided a complete education for our students. And she did say that it was appropriate to discuss difficult topics, which I agree with. But as evidenced by the curriculum in the aforementioned Race in America class, it's not a critical thinking that's happening, but rather an indoctrination of our students of a hateful and divisive ideology. As an example, although again, I understand the class is not running this semester, but as an example, one of the literary works in this class is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. He said, and I quote, "The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." Let that sink in for a minute. Is that the type of thing we want to promote in our school system? Perhaps in a future meeting, Dr. Antunes and the board could address why they believe this curriculum is appropriate in our schools and what educational purpose it serves, as it was approved in August of 2020. This indoctrination is not simply limited to one high school elective class. For example, the district's own social and emotional learning website contains a link to a group called Building Anti-Racist White Educators. It would appear that the board and this administration are either not paying attention or they are in favor of promoting division and hatred in our schools. To be fair, I would like to remind the public that at the last meeting, Mr. Gillette clearly spoke against critical race theory in our schools, and for this I thank him. Ms. Stats, on the other hand, clearly made a case why it should stay. I simply ask the voters in this town to remember these comments the next time they're at the ballot box. I respectfully request that the board add a discussion about critical race theory to a future meeting so the public can understand where each administrator and board member stands on the issue. I will not accept that our schools are going to teach divisive and hateful curriculum designed to tear communities apart. Finally, I have a very simple message for the administration and the board. Schools exist to teach students how to think, not what to think. It is the job of the district to teach skills such as reading, writing, and arithmetic. As parents, we'll handle morals, ethics, and values. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Gantz. Is there any other public comment?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Barker. I'm at 900 Merritt. First, thank you for having a discussion in reference to allowing homeschoolers to play. I did receive an email today that it was going to be discussed and that no change had been made. And I didn't know why until coming today. I know that you mentioned that there is no accountability. And I beg to differ. I think if you would have spoken to Mr. Domino, either the board themselves or individually, there is accountability. I have friends who are homeschool parents there. They do play sports there, and they do have to give a report card quarterly for the work that they have to do academically. So there is a willingness to work with the parent, the homeschool parent. And I didn't really hear that much tonight. It was just like no one contacted me to ask, how do I have accountability for my son and my other two girls who are in high school? They do want to go to college. There has to be accountability. My son goes to VOTEC. he has to keep up his grades in order to do the best that he can, to do what he wants to do. And so I just feel like more could have been done or communicated to me, or a conversation with me. No one has conversated with me on this board in reference to what I put in place to make sure that there is accountability, because I do want my kids to do well. They do. I do want them to go to college. I do want them to succeed. And I don't know if you feel that homeschoolers don't have a way of doing that, but there is a way to do that. So I did speak to Mr. Domino today, and he told me, Eugene, that you talked to him today and only today. But I'm not sure if you mentioned anything about accountability to him, because if you would have had the conversation that I had with him, there is. And so for a program that's been going on for 4 years that has done well, it has only enhanced their sports program. And I'm saddened that we as a county can't even get to that willingness or to that point to work together. As it feels like public school is here and homeschoolers are here. And if we are really about all of the students as a whole, then you should want to work with the homeschool families, because it's growing. As of right now, New Jersey, we're at 3.3%. That's 40 to 60,000 kids who are homeschooling. So it is going to but grow. So I think as a board, as a county, we have to figure out how to move forward. So I will continue to advocate. I will continue to talk to other counties and how they do and how they hold each other, their students eligible. And I hope that you will do the same.
Thank you, Ms. Barker.
Good evening, Henry Goodhue, Hillsborough Education Association. As Mr. Pulsifer brought up that we are beginning to consider budget plans, I do actually agree with his point that we are relatively thin when it comes to administration, especially within highly specialized professions within the district, and we really do need to consider supporting the individuals that work under them and ensuring that they have someone who is fully able to respect the profession and guide them in the important work that they do. But I will say that with noting also that while we have perhaps one of the lowest ratios of administrators to staff, we tend to be on the higher end of ratios of students to staff. Whereas New Jersey typically has 20 to 21 students per class, and admittedly that's 600 and some odd districts factored into that, we tend to be much higher than that. So as we plan out the budgets for, hopefully next year, I would urge the board to take a look at the numbers in various sections, both elementary, secondary, and 9-12, see where we need to actually make those investments, where we've lost those members in previous years, the 56 jobs that were previously lost, and really think about making those investments that impact the kids as well. Because if you take a look at the budgets, you can see the 6-period coverages have increased exponentially. And the reason they're increasing is because we don't have staff teaching those positions. And not that members don't willingly take those on, but for the students, we really do need to consider the numbers that are going into the classrooms and ask ourselves if 27 in an elementary class is acceptable, or if 30 to 31 in a high school class is acceptable. And if we do find those issues, make the investments to address them, while also recognizing that we need to make the investments in the administrative staff to help the district and the professionals who work here do the work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodhue. Is there any other public comments?
Good evening, Philip Gans, 10 Gillette Court. I have not
Excuse
lived
me,
in
sir.
Hillsborough.
Could you just repeat your name again?
I'm sorry?
Would you repeat your name?
Sure, Philip Gans, 10 Gillette Court. I'm a relatively new citizen here in Hillsborough, and this is the first Board of Education meeting that I've attended. But I do have something that I wanted to pose as a question, understanding I won't get an answer tonight. But before the first public session opened up this evening, it was read to us what the rules of engagement are, if you will. And it reads, if time, and this was read to us, if time remains in the public comment period, members of the public may comment on any school or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the school district as per bylaw 0167. Now, what I saw this evening was there were no public comments on agenda items, and the public session was cut off, and people were told you have to wait for the second. So I'm not sure if this is wording needs to be changed, or if in fact that is true, why are people not allowed to talk about items other than agenda items on that first public session? If you could, at some point, if you could just clarify that for the public, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gant. Is there any other public comments? Seeing no other public comment, then I will close public comment and then open it up for board comments. Mr. Gillette.
Yes, so just on the last question, the policies regarding, as Mr. Trio reported in the governance committee report, the policies regarding public participation at the board meetings are undergoing review, and there is some confusing language actually in the policies, and is that correct, Mr. Trio, that we're
correct.
working on that?
That is correct. So I'm actually have pulled up the current version of policy 167, which I believe the last time it was updated was in April 2016. And the preface that's listed on our agenda is in conflict with this. I believe that this was a vestige from back when we had hybrid meetings, or was it hybrid or virtual meetings? There was a resolution in which we had a discussion, and I probably have it here someplace, where we did allow for 2 public comment periods. Actually, I have it. So it was at our October 26, 2020 meeting. So that would have been, no, hang on. It's okay. Where we had a discussion. I have the date here, October 26, 2020. I think that we had a resolution to allow 2 30-minute comment periods, and that was during the period of remote public meetings. And so now that we're not in remote public meetings, we're in person, we reverted back to 167. So we will make sure that the preface that's listed on the agenda will be updated. Thank you, Mr. Gillette.
And can I have another one?
Please.
Sure, I'm going to keep going. So as to the athletic policy concerning participation by homeschool students, from the beginning, I was not in favor of amending the policy, but I was very interested in learning about our policy and how our policy might apply to, in this particular case, and to other cases. And I had those questions for Dr. Antunes at a couple of different meetings, I think. Because, look, I mean, I think that policy could be improved. We have students who attend the VOTEC school full-time. They never come in our buildings, yet they still play on our sports teams. And I was told that is because those students are, technically, they're registered in our district. And that kind of makes sense, because the VOTEC can only accept students from these sending districts in Somerset County. But the VOTEC does not require a student to be registered in their home district if they are attending the VOTEC part-time and part-time homeschooled. I mean, there's still, so it seems like there's a problem. The VOTEC school might have a problem. Why don't they just require their half-time students that are spending half the day at home learning and half the day in the VOTEC register with their home district? That would allow students, according to our policy, I guess, that would allow students attending VOTEC half-time to play on our sports teams. Am I getting that wrong, Dr. Tunis? You seem to say that the defining part of this was that the student was not registered in our district. Okay, so I mean, I think that VOTEC has an issue that they should solve for this family.
Mr. Pulsifer?
I'm going to piggyback on both of the issues you talked about there, Mr. Gillette, but I'm going to do it in the other order because I have the thought in my mind now. I think the distinction is those students can't be registered in our district because if they were registered in our district, they wouldn't be homeschooled by definition. So they can't do that. I understand what you're asking, and it makes sense from the VOTEC side, but the problem is the reason these students don't meet that criteria is because they're homeschooled, and by definition, homeschooled is not registered in our district, because if they were registered in our district, they'd be in our schools or at VOTEC full-time. And I think it's important that we look at this, and the public needs to understand, we don't look at this in the context of Mrs. Barker's and her children's situation. We make this for policy for all students that are homeschooled, and this is not something that we want to change every year as we get a different situation of somebody who's homeschooled one way or another. It has to be a policy that stands. And while some parents may be willing to meet some level of accountability, we have no way to verify that. We do know the grades of the students in our classes. We do know that those students attended school today and participate in tonight's game. We don't know, and we can't require in any way that we can verify that a homeschool student is meeting grade levels and is in attendance, whatever that means, on the day of a competition. And to me, that's a real question of fairness to all the students who we do hold that over their heads, that you cannot participate unless you meet all of our requirements. And homeschool students, we have no way to make them or verify in any legal sense that they're meeting our requirements. I understand Mrs. Barker is willing to provide some level of accountability for her son, but from the policy perspective, we can't make a decision based on that. We have to make a decision based on doing something that's fair to our students and that we can always get right, or that we can always follow. And I think that's missing in this situation.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Mr. Kidd.
If I'm going to be correct, during the committee meeting, didn't we discuss that the policy of the in terms of like New Jersey, like the New Jersey like Student Sports Association? I don't remember the exact name of the association. Wasn't there a policy they had that only children registered in the schools could compete in those competitions? So like for track, or am I mistaken?
Mr. Kidd, I believe you're referring to the NJSIAA's bylaws. I do believe that the way it's written, it depends on the home district's policy. So if the home district has a policy to allow all students, homeschool students to participate, then that the student would be eligible. In our case, in Hillsborough's case, our policy has been that we do not allow homeschool students to participate in athletics
Or extracurricular.
or extracurricular activities. Thank you. Mr. Oliver.
Yeah, just to kind of echo Mr. Pulsifer's point, and I know he thinks that we played with leather helmets when I went to high school, but we actually really had real football helmets.
Mr. Oliver, would you a little closer? Thank you.
Sorry. So, you know, one of the key things, the way I look at athletics is a privilege. It's teamwork, okay? So, you know, many times if you were tardy to school, or maybe you had grades were down, or you were absent that day, you couldn't attend practice, you couldn't attend games. You were prohibited from doing that. So as a student who's attending the school, I'm held to a different standard than a homeschool student. If my grades slipped, teachers would talk to the coach and say, you know, Oliver got a D on his last English paper, you better have a talk with him. You know, you pick up the English paper or you're going to sit the pines for a little bit. Quarterly reporting from a parent about a student isn't sufficient, right? In my mind, that's not sufficient. And we spent a lot of time discussing this at the HR meeting. We spent a lot of time discussing it at the education committee. There are very few schools in our area that allow homeschool students to participate in athletics. Now, that's not a reason to deny it, but there's a lot of things that they brought up to us. And trust me, a lot of the individual board members reached out to a lot of different coaches, and we've explored this. The last thing we want to do is discourage or prohibit a student from being involved in any sports or any extracurricular activities, because I think it's an integral part of being a student. But it has to be equitable. It has to be fair to all the other students. There may be ways to hold homeschool students accountable. I'm not going to say it's a dead issue, but it's something we could discuss at another point in time, but for right now, I think the board has made a good decision that's fair and equitable for all the students. So it's unfortunate, it's not necessarily the decision that we want to hear right now from the public. The public wants to hear that from us right now, but again, we're not just answering to 1 or 2 or 20 people in the room, we're answering to district-wide. So I think it was the fairest decision.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Ms. Nurse, and then Mr. Gillette.
I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Kidd, I know that you were talking about the NJSIAA. It did say in there that homeschool children were not allowed to play, but then it goes on to say unless a local school board changes policy. So you were correct that it did say it was homeschooled children were not eligible to play.
Thank you. I didn't know if I was misremembering.
Thank you for the clarification, Ms. Nurse. Mr. Gillette, then Mr. Pulsifer.
Right, so it's not going to surprise anyone that I reject the definition of critical race theory provided by the board president today and provided by NJSBA. That's not how parents understand the issue. And be that as it may, we don't even have to talk about critical race theory. Parents just don't want a racially charged curriculum agenda in this school district. That's all. Don't call it that. But it's what I wanted to say tonight is that, excuse me, it's not just this isn't just about students. It's also about teachers and staff. Let me read you a couple of examples of what has gone on around the country as regard to teachers and other staff. A Springfield, Missouri middle school compelled teachers to locate themselves on an oppression matrix. Teachers were required to consent to the dictates of social justice work. Portland Public Schools have required teachers to attend weekly anti-racism training sessions that divided faculty along lines of oppression. Faculty were advised that they had to profess the beliefs taught in the sessions and could lose their jobs if they did not reorient their classroom instruction along the prescribed lines. The San Diego Unified School District, in addition to forbidding teachers from requiring that homework be turned in on time as part of an anti-racism initiative, required faculty to attend mandatory training sessions that accused public schools of the spirit murder of Black children and required teachers to admit their white fragility. And I don't think residents and parents in this town want these type of things in our district. I'm not saying they're here, but I also don't see administration pledging that they won't be. I've asked that at a board retreat. I asked administration to make a pledge to keep these things out, and they didn't do that. In fact, Gwen Thornton from the New Jersey School Boards Association told the board that we were prohibited from asking the administration how they would be teaching the subjects, as long as we're just here as monitors to make sure that the state mandates are being met, and the how is going to be determined by the educational professionals. So, I mean, this is what it is. Parents don't want it, residents don't want a racially charged school district, and don't talk about critical race theory anymore, because I'm not going to. I'm not using that term anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Mr. Pulsifer, did you, and then Ms. Maroon.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to this before the discussion about how we have public comment. Since that came up, we looked at both sides. I think one point that's important to keep in mind as we work through that is the primary function of this meeting is for the board to conduct its business in the view of the public and take action in view of the public. So I do think it's important to separate comments about our official actions and our agenda, because that is why we have this meeting. And we do plenty of other things, but the reason we have this meeting, the reason we're required to have this meeting is to take our official action in view of the public. So to me, it makes very good sense to say at one part of the meeting, we are going to talk about we will talk about our official business, and the public can give us comment on our official business that we're going to attend to that evening, and separately, discussions of whatever we want to discuss, but that would be after we have done our official business. Because I think it's important when we discuss this about how to allocate that time, is that we want to make sure, for the sake of the public who cannot or is not interested in being here until 11:30 at night when we finally vote on our agenda, that we should have the agenda and the discussion of the agenda early. And for those who wish to stay and discuss other issues for even longer, we can have another public comment session. But I do believe it's important to get the agenda earlier, which we've done with the consent agenda, and get that discussion early and get it done. And then we can move on to all the other public discussion and the other board discussion. But I do think it's important that we keep our work and our official business at the beginning and constrain that as both a board and public discussion, and then move on to other subjects.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Ms. Maroon?
Yeah, I just had a question, Greg. If you could just email me the articles and the sources of those articles that you mentioned, that'd be great. Thanks.
No problem. The examples I gave were the examples cited in the Manhattan Institute's, their model legislation for governments that would like to restrict this type of racially charged curriculum in their schools. I'll send you the whole link.
Thank you.
If you would be okay with that, Mr. Gillette, if you would email the entire board so that we can all.
I probably sent it to you in the past. Mr.
Thank you.
Chair, but I'll send it again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gillette. Ms. Stats?
Regarding examples of what has happened elsewhere in the country, there's examples of all sorts of crazy things that happen in other districts throughout the country, even aside from racism, equity, and all that. There are districts in our country that have pretty low standards that teach other very questionable things, again, aside from racism. And it's not being brought, there's no concern there, because it's not happening here. That's not happening here. The examples cited by Mr. Gillette and others regarding to critical race theory, or whatever you want to call it, it's not happening here. And with respect to the public comment, I did not say anything about promoting critical race theory. I was discussing specifically the contention that teachers are teaching children to feel less than they really are. I specifically addressed that. I said nothing about critical race theory. I'll reiterate, teachers choose the profession of teaching because they love children. They abhor the idea of having any child feel less than they are for whatever reason, whether it's based on racism. I'm retired. I still regret the times, and I can picture in my head, the times where a student has cried in my classroom because of failing a test, because they hate proofs, because they hate the F word, factoring, polynomials. But I don't think there's any clamoring to eliminate any of that. Yes, those are uncomfortable topics. Those are difficult topics. Discussing racism is uncomfortable. But I think it's safe to say that our teachers in our district are not encouraging the idea of any child feeling less than they truly are. They go out of their way to make them feel as good as they truly are, and promoting a good feeling of self-worth, and giving them experiences to express their full worth without the expense to any students at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Any other, Mr. Oliver?
So just one last thought. And Sarah, I know you said you moved into the district about 10 years ago because you wanted to, you saw this as a district to get a great education for your kids. And I'm going to say to you, you chose wisely. So I moved into this district about 38 years ago. I grew up in Bound Brook, so I didn't move far, but it was a district I thought that provided a great education. It was, you know, it was funny, Montgomery school districts, I always felt was a little bit better. They were a little cut above Hillsborough. And I think in the most recent study, we finished above Montgomery in the rankings. I used to employ some kids from both the high schools in Hillsborough and Montgomery, and I just felt they were a little bit better. But, you know, I think Hillsborough provides a great education. I put 2 children through the school district. I've got 1 more, be graduating in a couple of years. But your comments are not falling on deaf ears, because what's going on around the country with CRT is a hot button. And just because it's happening in other parts of the country doesn't mean it's going to happen in Hillsborough, but it could. And I personally don't want to see it, because to your point, prejudice is not learned in the school, it's learned in the home, right? There's certain things that the parents need to do to ensure that their kids are being taught right from wrong. And the school teaches reading, writing, arithmetic, right? Now, bullying and, you know, demoralizing people because of their race or religion needs to be put in its place immediately, and that's how it's stopped, right? So if someone makes an ethnic slur to someone, whoever sees it should stop it, whether you're sitting in 7-Eleven, Dunkin' Donuts, or the high school, right? So it's every one of our jobs to stop it in its tracks so it never happens again. That's how we stop it. But at some point in time, we need to adopt a policy to not allow it to be taught in curriculum. And to your point, there are a couple of Facebook posts that I could see from people within the school district that are teaching our children that could be construed as inflammatory, that it's being slipped in a little bit here and there. I've seen it. So I hear your comments, and they're not falling on deaf ears. I do think that this board needs to work to put forth a policy that stops it in its tracks, that it doesn't happen. We don't become like those districts in, I don't know where you said, Missouri or wherever they are across the country, but we need to do it. We need to do it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Mr. Kidd?
My main concern with such a policy would be how we would phrase it and what definition of whatever we are banning would be. Because, I mean, as we just saw, CRT all of a sudden had like a conflict in terms of definitions. So while I can definitely concur with the idea of making sure that we're not teaching children to hate themselves based on the color of their skin, what policy can be designated to determine that we don't already have in terms of state mandates on against racial discrimination? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Ms. Stats?
Yeah, for the sake of our children, I understand how we would not want students to be taught anything that would make them feel less than what they are. But I do sort of bristle against the idea of any kind of banning. Brings to mind censorship. There is a fine line. I do think this is something we need to explore, though, in more depth. Instead of a reactionary kind of thing to comment, to maybe more proactive kind of discussion, maybe even a presentation about the components of our curriculum related to equity, racism, et cetera, and explore that more openly, publicly.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Is there any other public comment? I'm sorry, board comment? Okay, seeing none, I actually have just a few announcements or just things that I wanted to bring up. Mr. Oliver, you had said about Facebook posts. So there were some Facebook posts just in general about like people wondering what supports were available for their children who might have anxiety about COVID. I know that has been it is challenging, right? Some students are struggling with the reintegration back into school if they were virtual all year. So my recommendation is first, of course, to reach out to your child's teacher And then each school has an excellent school counseling department, so reach out to the school counselor for resources. And I know people have said that it's difficult to get private therapy, so what I wanted to share with you are two resources. The Pioneer Family Success Center that is located in Somerville, and if you Google that, it's Pioneer Family Success Center, and it's online, it's in Somerville, and they're basically a one-stop shop that provides wraparound services and supports for families before they find themselves in crisis, and also if they find themselves in crisis. And they offer everything that they do is free. So basically, if you call them and you let them know what is going on with your child and your family, they will be able to connect you with resources free of charge. Now, I don't know about the services specifically that they would refer you to, but they would be able to at least guide you in that sense. The other resource that I wanted to share is New Jersey's Perform Care, and that's at performcarenj.org. And they're a state agency that helps families for free across New Jersey, and they're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I'll give you their phone number. You can also Google them, Perform Care. It's 877-652-7624, and the description is that sometimes it can be hard to know when you should reach out for extra help. Families should call if their child's behavior has changed or if they are overwhelmed by challenges at home or in the community. Some common reasons to call Perform Care include depression and/or anxiety, bullying or being bullied, physical and verbal aggression, intellectual/developmental disabilities, substance use, inattention or hyperactivity, oppositional or defiant behavior, grief from major trauma, and concerns from teachers. So I wanted to share that resource with the community. Then there is also from the township, Hillsborough's Community Assistance Network, the food bank, that they are having a food distribution this Thursday, September 30th, from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at the Willow Road Complex. That's 530 Willow Road. And the items that they will be distributing are produce, cheeses, and meat products. It's a no-contact event. Items will be placed directly in your vehicle's trunk. Please register on the township's webpage or by calling the Social Services Office at 908-369-3880. Proof of residency is required, so please bring your driver's license. Then, I'm almost done. Then this, October 6th, I believe that's a Wednesday, is Knockout Opioid Abuse Day. And if you go to the Partnership for Drug-Free New Jersey's website, there will be a lot of information, and it's a statewide initiative that mobilizes the prevention and treatment communities, community leaders, and concerned citizens to raise awareness of the risks of prescription opioids and their link to heroin and fentanyl use, reduce the stigma of addiction, and shine a light on the need for recovery support. And then finally, for school board candidates or for anybody who might consider running for school board one day, there is school boards runs every year regional candidates briefing, and this year it will be online, and for the central region, which is where we're at, is Tuesday, October 12th. If you go to njsba.org, you can Google for the link, and it's the board member candidates briefing, and it's free of charge, and participants will receive information about the overview of the role of a board member, legal requirements, what it means to be a policy-making body, training requirements, ethical considerations, and all the resources that are available. It is a virtual program at no cost to the candidates or the district. And so with that, I wanted to again thank our administration and district staff for the hard work and dedication to our students. I also wanted to thank parents again for supporting your children by encouraging them to learn and for expressing your positive attitude. Our words, actions, and attitudes have more impact on our children than is immediately apparent. So I thank parents for expressing your confidence in our public schools. And so if there are no further comments from the board, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Postford. Thank you, Mr. Marini. Mr. Oliver. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. We will see you in 2 weeks, I believe.